Beneath the roofless sandstone walls of a city built for 1,200 people, archaeologists found 11,000 turquoise beads and not a single fleeing corpse. The people of Chaco Canyon didn't vanish into legend. They walked north, and their granddaughters are alive right now. Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, mid-winter dusk this year. The light goes the color of a bruise, and the wind comes down the canyon the way it has for 1,000 years, moving through 650 empty rooms with a sound like breath held too long. Pueblo Bonito rises in front of you, 5 stories of shaped sandstone, roofless now, the timbers hauled off or rotted away. It was the largest building in North America until the 1800s. Nobody built taller for 700 years, and it's silent. That's the thing that gets under your skin when you stand here. There should be smoke. There should be the scrape of grinding stones on corn, the sound of children, dogs, the low murmur of 1,000 lives stacked one on top of another. Instead, there's the wind and the cold and the great kivas sunk into the earth like empty eye sockets. This place was swept clean around 1150 AD, not burned, not stormed, emptied. A city that took 3 centuries and 200,000 timber beams to build, walked away from in the span of a generation. Here's what I need you to understand. For over a century, the story was that these people simply disappeared, that drought erased them, that they scattered into the desert and were gone. And everyone who told that story pointed south and west, toward where the refugees supposedly fled. But no one ever found them. No mass graves along the escape routes. No dying settlements choked with the bones of the starving. No blood in the dirt. 1,200 people, and the direction everyone assumed they ran is empty. A whole civilization exits stage left, and the stage stays clean. That absence is the loudest thing in this canyon. Let me tell you why this went unanswered for as long as it did, because the answer says more about us than it does about them. Start with the name. Anasazi. You've heard it. It's on park signs, on pottery and gift shops, on documentaries you half-watched as a kid. It sounds ancient and mysterious, and that's exactly the problem. Anasazi is a Navajo word. It doesn't mean the ancient ones, the way the brochures soften it. It means ancient enemies. We labeled an entire civilization with a slur borrowed from a different people. And then we built a mystery on top of it. The man who cracked open Chaco for the modern world was Richard Wetherill, a rancher turned excavator who started digging Pueblo Bonito in 1896. He pulled treasures out of these rooms by the crate, and the framing that took hold, carried forward by respected men like A.V. Kidder, the founding father of Southwestern archaeology, was that these people were a lost race, extinct, a vanished civilization with no living heirs. Think about how convenient that was. If the builders of Chaco were gone, truly gone, then the land they built on was empty, available, a frontier waiting to be claimed. An extinct people can't object. An extinct people has no descendants standing at the fence line saying, "That was ours, we never left." So the gap filled with theories, and the theories got dark. Drought did it, people said, as if a dry spell could erase engineers who'd already survived droughts for 300 years. And then came the worst of it, the rumors of a cannibal collapse, of a society that ate itself in its final starving days. That story sold books. It made Chaco a place of horror instead of a place of home. For over a century, academia treated the living Pueblo peoples as strangers to this canyon. The Hopi, the Zuni, the people whose own oral histories said plainly, "Our ancestors built that. Our clans walked out of those cities and carried the memory with us." Anthropologists nodded politely and filed it under folklore. They were wrong. Every one of them. Then the science arrived, and it arrived through a doorway no one had been able to open before. For most of the 20th century, ancient DNA was a fantasy. Bones this old, baked in desert heat and handled by a century of excavators, don't hold usable genetic material in the places you'd expect. Skin, teeth, the long bones, degraded, contaminated, useless. The past kept its mouth shut. But history is rarely a story of ghosts. It's a story of people who left something behind, and of us finally learning where to look. Around 2015, a technique matured that changed everything. There's a bone in your skull, the petrous, the densest bone in the human body that shields the inner ear. It also shields DNA. Deep inside that bone, the genetic code can survive for millennia when the rest of the skeleton has surrendered. In 2017, 2 researchers went looking inside that bone. What they pulled out of Chaco named names. Let's start where the wealth was. Room 33. It's a small chamber, buried deep inside Pueblo Bonito, and it is the single richest burial ever found in the North American Southwest. Nothing else comes close. Inside, 14 individuals were laid to rest across generations, and they were not laid to rest lightly. Layered around them were more than 11,000 turquoise beads, 2 ceremonial staffs, shell trumpets that came from the Sea of Cortez, hundreds of miles away, cacao residue in cylinder jars, meaning chocolate carried up from Mesoamerica, over 1,000 miles distant. Here's why that matters. This is not what an egalitarian farming village leaves in the ground. You don't bury 11,000 turquoise beads with 14 people, unless those 14 people were different, elevated. This was a house with something to inherit, and something worth inheriting means power, and power means it passed to someone, a dynasty, a ruling line in a place we'd been told had no kings, which raises the obvious question. If this was a dynasty, how was the crown passed down? Who inherited Chaco? The answer was written in the mitochondria. Let me explain what that is because it's the key to the whole story, and it's simpler than it sounds. Most of your DNA is a shuffle, half from your mother, half from your father, remixed every generation until the trail blurs. But there's one piece that never shuffles. Mitochondrial DNA. Your mother gave it to you unchanged, and she got it unchanged from her mother, and so on. Back and back, an unbroken maternal chain running like a thread through time. Your mitochondrial DNA is nearly identical to that of a woman who lived 30 generations ago. Follow the thread, and you follow the mother's. So the geneticists Douglas Kennett at Penn State and his colleague Adam Watson followed the thread through room 33. They sequenced 9 of the individuals, and every single one carried the same maternal signature. A haplogroup called B2Y1, identical, mother to child, across 9 generations and roughly 330 years. That's not a coincidence. That's a rule. Power in Chaco descended through the women. This was a matrilineal dynasty, the crown passing from mother to daughter to granddaughter for over 3 centuries, which is exactly how the Hopi and the Zuni organize their clans today, right now, this very year. The dead in that room weren't strangers to the living. They were keeping the same rules. So they had a dynasty and they had a system. But a dynasty needs a reach. What was Chaco actually running? Look up and look for straight lines. Radiating out from this canyon are the roads, perfectly straight, 9 meters wide, cut across mesa and arroyo without regard for terrain, some running over 60 miles. They connect Chaco to dozens of outlying great houses, satellite communities built in the same monumental style. This wasn't a village. It was the hub of a network that covered an area the size of Ireland. Here's why that matters. You don't build 30-foot wide ceremonial roads for foot traffic to the next farm. You build them to bind a region to a center, to move goods and people and belief along corridors that say, this is the heart, and everything flows to it. The timber alone tells you 200,000 construction beams, spruce and fir and ponderosa pine, hauled by hand from mountains 50 miles off, because Chaco itself is nearly treeless. No draft animals, no wheels, every log carried on human backs. Something coordinated that, something with authority. And when a center that powerful goes quiet, the people who ran it don't evaporate. They take the system with them, which is where we should have found the bodies, and didn't. In my field, what you don't find matters as much as what you do. And along every route the refugees supposedly took, the record is empty in exactly the wrong way. No abandoned death camps, no trail of famine burials, no scattered belongings flung down in panic. If a starving population had collapsed and scattered to die, the desert would be full of them. It isn't. Here's the finding that should have ended the debate decades ago. The pottery moves, Chaconne ceramic styles, the specific painted designs, the construction methods don't disappear around 1150. They migrate. North to Aztec and Mesa Verde, then further to the Rio Grande, to the Hopi mesas, to Zuni. The technology walks, the architecture walks, the clan symbols walk. People carry their pottery, ghosts don't. So this looked solved. The Chacoans didn't die. They relocated, carrying their material culture into new homelands. And that could have been the whole story, tidy and complete. And then someone matched a genome to a living girl. Here is where everything turns. The researchers took the maternal signature from room 33, that B2Y1 thread pulled from a woman dead 900 years, and they compared it to modern genetic databases from living Pueblo communities. It matched, gene for gene. The mitochondrial line of a Chacoan noblewoman appeared in a Hopi individual living today, 40 miles from the canyon, 9 centuries downstream. The same unbroken thread running from a burial chamber full of turquoise straight into a house where someone right now is making dinner. Stop and hold that. The people we called the ancient enemies, the lost race, the vanished civilization we built 100 years of mystery around. They never vanished. They're not extinct. They were never even really gone. They just moved, and they told us. For over 100 years, the Hopi and the Zuni said, those are our grandmothers. We walked out of those cities. We remember the leaving. And we called it folklore and kept digging for a mystery that wasn't there. The genome closed the case. The oral history opened. The dead woman in room 33 and the living girl in the Hopi village are the same family. The same maternal line, unbroken across 30 generations, across a fallen empire, across the entire span of what we thought was a disappearance. There was no disappearance. There was only a walk north and a memory kept faithfully by the people who took it with them. Now let me show you what this reframe destroys, because it doesn't stop at Chaco. There's a second mystery in the American Southwest, older and uglier than the empty city, the cannibalism. In the 1990s, at a site called Cowboy Wash in southwestern Colorado, archaeologists led by Brian Billman found something that made headlines around the world. 7 human bodies, disarticulated, cut marks on the bones, skulls cracked open, cooking pots. And in 2000, in a coprolite, fossilized human waste, a biochemist named Richard Marlar detected human myoglobin, a protein that only enters the gut if a person has eaten human muscle. The proof seemed absolute. Someone at that site ate people. And the story that grew from it was monstrous. The Anasazi, the tale went, collapsed into savagery. Europe, a civilization that consumed itself as the drought closed in. It fit the cannibal collapse narrative perfectly, and it stained an entire people. But watch what the reframe does to it. Cowboy Wash dates to around 1150, the exact moment Chaco's authority shattered and the network came apart. This wasn't a whole civilization descending into cannibalism. It was a violent rupture at the edge of a collapsing state, a single, horrific event at one site during a specific power vacuum. The Hopi have their own name for what walked the land in those years. They speak of the two hearts, the practitioners of witchcraft, and of terror used as a weapon to break communities apart. And here's the detail that reframes the reframe. The maternal lines at Cowboy Wash don't match the local Pueblo populations. The victims, and quite possibly the perpetrators, weren't the ancestral Chacoan dynasty at all. This wasn't a people eating itself. It was violence done to a community during the worst years of a political implosion, and then hung for a century around the necks of their descendants. We took the crime of a collapse and blamed the entire civilization for it. We took a terror inflicted on people and called it their nature. The genome that named the survivors also cleared them. So here's what the sequencing of 9 bodies in one room actually did. It reached past 120 years of a name that meant enemy. Past Wetherell's crates and Kidder's extinct race. Past the empty frontier that was never empty. It's easy to think of archaeology as the study of the dead. It isn't, always. Sometimes you open a grave and the person inside is, in every way that matters, still here. Still cooking, still keeping the clan, still telling her children the story of the great houses their family left behind. What I keep coming back to is that we spent a century searching for where a people went, when their descendants had been standing 40 miles away the whole time, telling us, this is what a label can do. Call a people extinct, and you inherit their land. Call their memory folklore, and you get to keep the mystery. The word Anasazi didn't just misname a civilization. It performed a disappearance that never actually happened, on paper, so the ground could be claimed. The Hopi and the Zuni prefer a different term now. Ancestral Puebloans, not the ancient enemies, the ancestors of someone specific, someone living, someone whose grandmother sleeps under turquoise in room 33. A civilization is never truly lost, while one person still remembers the way home. If this reached you, subscribe. I dig into the stories where the science finally caught up to what people had been saying all along. And tell me in the comments, what other so-called lost civilizations do you think were never really lost, just never really listened to? I read everyone.